you just focus on the...
Right. So for today, we're going to do a recap of what we said yesterday, just so that we refresh our memory and that it ties in with the things we'll do today. Today is a fantastic day because you're going to do risk assessment. I like to say risk assessment is the basis of information security. And if you say you're an information security professional, then essentially you're a risk manager. You're managing risk on behalf of the business. So that's, as you can see, that is what we'll do. And then also be able to differentiate between what is risk assessment and risk management. Some people just use the terms differently. In fact, they even throw in risk analysis. All those terms are different, okay? And then of course, today will be a very quick one. We'll just go ahead and do assessment. So you won't hear my voice too much today. It's going to just be a recap of yesterday, risk assessment and risk management, and then an assessment of what we do. Of course, there are still a few pages from yesterday that we'll just finish, so don't forget that. And then, unfortunately, there's no way we can teleport dinner for you. We'll allow you to go have your own dinner, and then we'll continue.
All right.
Okay, yeah, Yasin, Wale will provide you with my contact details. All that has been explained from yesterday, so definitely. LinkedIn is a very good place. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so we can all connect on LinkedIn. And from there, take it out to where we can take it to. Okay, so Wale, how do you want to do this quiz? Just ask it and they type in the answers?
Correct.
Okay, what does PDCA stand for? And when I asked that question, I was just about to say, don't just tell me Plan, Do, Check, Act. I want some bit of background to your answer. Okay, like it's Plan, Do, Check, Act, and it's also blah, blah, blah. So some more information than just Plan, Do, Check, Act. I want something more. Yes, it's the Plan, Do, Check, Act. Yeah, Fatima, continue. Thank you, Fatima. That's what I want to see. Well done, Mo. Yes, Toyi. So step by step, Toyi. We want the second step. Well done, Fatima. That's what I want. So you'll soon nail the last one. Thank you, Kenneth. Okay, act, update, and improve. Well done, Fatima. I caught all the answers. Oluronke, act, update, and thank you, Anne. Very good. It's an iterative process. Abba. Plan, scope, do, implement. Well done, Edward.
5, 6, 7.
Fantastic. Okay. So now let's move on. Well done. Okay. Very good. Now the second question, 2 benefits of ISMS. Now this one, I'm hoping to see different answers. Just list 2 benefits of an ISMS. Secure the exchange of information. Very good. Fatima. Concurrent advantage. Manages and minimizes risk exposure. Yep. Minimize risk. Dotun. Very good. Enhance customer satisfaction. Very good one, that one. Protect assets. Maintain reputation. Reduce risk. Build a culture of security. Fantastic answers. Competitive advantage. Very, very good answers. Client confidence. Fantastic. Now, how many clauses are there? I'm going to catch a few people here now. 7, 10. 9. Oh, wow. 10, 6, 8. And you all get different answers. 14. Right. Very good answers. And I think I understand why we're putting different numbers like that. So we have the strategic clauses from 4 to 10. Okay. And then we have 14 clauses in the annex. So there are 7 clauses in the main requirements section, and then there are 14 clauses from the other side. So there's 7 in the first, and then there's 14 in the annex. Well done. Yes, thank you. Okay, let's move on. Yes, so we defined what an ISMS was yesterday as part of what we were recapping. We said what 27001 was, that it was also called an ISMS. We looked at its applicability and its objectives and who the ISO as a body was. We defined that. We also talked about how long the certificate lasts for, and we looked at how many months it takes to implement ISO 27001. Okay, the mandatory clauses of ISO 27001 are clauses 4 to 10. Mandatory. The annex has to come with your risk assessment, the result of the risk assessment. You select controls from the annex. So the annex is optional based on your risk assessment, but clause 4 to 10 is mandatory for every organization. You must comply with 4 to 10 once you select to do the ISO 27001. We also looked at assets and then talked about the benefits, looked through the PDCA cycle, and then we stopped at the clauses, which is what we just did right now. So for the implementation, you have to have the people, the processes, the technology from the risk assessment, and of course the documentation. The documentation has to be valuable to tie in with the controls you have. And of course, not to focus too much on having the documentation, but the focus should be on having the controls. So auditors prefer to come and not see enough documentation, but adequate control, than not to come and not see adequate controls and so many documents to prove you have the documents. So documentation is important, but not as important as the controls themselves. And then of course, we talked about the fact that everyone must be involved from management down to operators. Then we did not cover what aids success because we closed on time yesterday. And then of course, the impediments to success. But from the questions you asked today regarding challenges to the implementation of ISO, that could be counted as impediments to success. As an example, some businesses are nepotistic. That means they are not properly put together. They favor rather than looking at competence. Now, because of that, if they do that, there will be no continuity of businesses. Okay, there will be no continuity of businesses, and it will affect the ISMS. Now, the things that aid success is effective reporting, full involvement of everyone, consistency, and of course, having a system. Now, with regards to auditing, because information security applies even without technology. So in theory, an organization that does not have PCs and systems can implement ISO 27001. So a technical audit is not always necessary. And besides, ISO 27001 professionals and auditors do not always have to have technical backgrounds. It is recommended and it is encouraged to do as much as your competence takes you. So if you don't have a technical background, engage with someone to cover your competence, to complement your competence. So there isn't always a necessity to do technical checks. As a matter of fact, it is more about processes and procedures, and then using subject matter experts to check your technical vulnerabilities and your technical non-conformities. That's if the risk points to that direction. The audits that's done is always a risk-based audit. Now, the implementation approach, I've devised methodologies for certain companies, big and small. I'm especially in the small and medium-sized space, as Smart Consulting is as well. So we create methodologies, we use well-known methodologies, and of course, we improve on existing methodologies. The ISO also says to use a methodology that drives you in whichever direction you want to go to. It's not a hard and fast rule with regards to the implementation. It has to match your scale, your complexity, your technology, your people, and your culture in essence. Okay, So you can do it in terms of key processes. You can do it systematically throughout the whole business using a well-known method. You can do it in terms of integrating it to your existing processes. So rather than creating new processes, you can simply just integrate it into your existing processes. So you can implement all your procedural pieces called out in the documentation. And of course, you have to check your implementation in steps, in several layers. Okay? All right. Yep. So at a high level, we said the implementation approach, we can use the Deming wheel. Yeah, the plan, do, check, act. Most methodologies use that. Even if they change the title from plan, from do, from check, and act, they typically use that methodology, and it's encouraged in almost all information security methodologies. And remember, I gave you the illustration about the act part, continual improvement. So that must always be embedded in whatever methodology and approach you use. You must plan it, do it, check what you've done, and then improve it. And finally, get a third party audit, a certificate audit. Now, in the check, within the check, you see you have monitoring, you have measuring. That means you are always keeping an eye. Day by day, week by week, month by month, there are checks, and then scheduled audits, whether quarter, 6 months, or whatever schedule works for you. And after the audit, you then have management review. The management review will tell you if you are ready to go and improve. So the things you check in the audit will be discussed and deliberated by management in the management review meetings. Then you do corrective and preventive actions, and then you can select a certification body to audit you externally. Yes, so management has a big role to play. In fact, all of Clause 5 is dedicated to management, and then a bit of that in some other places as well, like roles and responsibilities, policy, training and awareness, competence in Clause 7. Management has a big role. In most projects, if management is not involved, then there's a great chance that that project will not succeed, because we want them to show the importance of the project, give us their backing, put a stamp, give us the authority, a document that says, hey, we believe in this project. That way, we know when we go to finance, because we have a need for a resource, they would provide that resource. So management's role is very, very great. And besides, they are the ones that will ensure that there are no friction between departments. If security sits under IT, if management plays a very, very prominent role, then it can ease those kind of tensions. Okay, so management plays a very, very big role. That's why it says to adopt a series of overarching management processes to ensure that security controls continue to meet the security needs. And also management know what is critical to the business, or they should know because they run the business. So they know the critical things. They know what can make the business go bust. They deliberate on board meetings. They are looking at the value of the business as a whole. And so we need them to be involved. ISO as a system is that strategic to the success of the business and to protect it against its risks. That's why I said information security foundationally is managing the risk of any business, of any enterprise. Yep. Okay. Now, if there is insufficient support from senior management, the first tough decision that caused it must be pushed aside. That means they do it on a priority basis. What is stopping us from succeeding? Like I said, and the question somebody asked, I said we see this many times where there is no visibility of management support. There's a great chance that the project would fail, even as a project at the project phase, or when it becomes business as usual. Management must continue to show support. So when it's still a project, they are allowing the right people come off their regular jobs to be part of the project if need be. They're providing supply, they're connecting suppliers to the project, supplying resources. And then when it becomes business as usual, they are requiring reports. What are you doing? Are we succeeding? Are we failing? They are looking at key risk indicators if their goals will not be met. They're looking at key performance indicators to see that they're doing well. They're requiring stuff. Yeah, they're calling people and wanting to find out if it's succeeding. So impediments to success contain insufficient prioritization. You push it to the side. And one of the things that can cause insufficient prioritization is a lack of skill of the security manager, not being able to put the benefit of the project and convey that message in a business case and an ongoing sell. So an ongoing sell means once you get the project done, you don't stop there. You continue to sell the importance of security. This is why security should be on the front burner. This is why you should be discussing it in board meetings. This is why you should be giving us Tesla cars to go about and giving us the best-in-class mobile phones when we ask you to do. Yeah, you must continue to sell security to the business. Yeah, it can also, like I said, resources or expertise. We need people to be trained, and business drags its feet. They don't want to pay for the staff you're asking for, or they don't want to send you on the training that you need. I also talked about a loss of continuity over time. Say top management changes, that is a significant change. The business or the top leader we had before was tech hungry and believed in security, and then management changes. You know the way executives move, it goes somewhere else. I will get a new executive. That change in management might cause a significant change. As a matter of fact, it's so significant that it's one of the things that if it changes and you've been certified, you must report to the certificate body to say, hey, with our way of doing business has changed. We don't have the same management anymore, or we have started doing new products. We have started delivering new service. Those are significant changes. Okay. Conversely, what can cause success to an ISMS? Typically, what we see is effective reporting. As a matter of fact, communication, consultation, stakeholder engagement should happen from the beginning when you're planning and to the full 360 degrees continuously. There must be no break in communication. Reporting to operators, those that do stuff, operating to middle management as at required, reporting to top management before they go for board meeting in their management reviews, and even reporting to external interested parties. Okay, so you must understand your audience. That's why it says make presentation in the audience's language. I was going to put a post out today because in certain countries, people just come and make speeches, and it doesn't matter whether the audience like your style of speaking, whether they are motivated, whether they get your message, you just deliver it and you turn your back. That is not a good principle of communication. So ISO 27001 in clause 7.4 says you must devise a communication strategy that ensures success in big matters like security. Okay, cool. Yeah, we also talked about tracking by functional entity. So you would track, know what you're sending to IT, know what you're sending to finance, to HR, and also by layer. So to all the analysts and operators and administrators, you are tracking to see what they are doing, their roles, their responsibilities, and success. Okay, you are also tracking it in middle management level and also at top management level. Not only reporting, you are tracking because everybody gets involved. Remember, it is management system. So even if they've got their job descriptions before and doing their job, they will get additional jobs to do, additional responsibilities related to security. And so the security manager or security coordinator, CISO, whatever title is given, would have to check this, track everybody's effort to see that security is successful. Okay, what their impact is, who is lagging behind. And so when everybody gets a consistent view of risk, they can attack risk or tackle risk rather in a consistent manner. Okay. Yeah, so I've just mentioned about job responsibilities for everyone in different places. As a matter of fact, the best and effective ISMSs would give responsibilities even to security guards, even to cleaners. They would have their specific ISMS job responsibilities. So it involves everyone. And then, of course, for those that you could say have white collar responsibilities, you must test their knowledge and capabilities. Do like a competence review. What is this person supposed to do? Should we have we've done our risk assessment, we find we need a firewall. Then you must know whether you need a firewall manager and a firewall engineer. So what knowledge and capabilities should they have? And then, of course, give them their security responsibilities. Okay? And then, of course, actions should be acknowledged. There should be acceptable use. And everyone's action should correspond to the policies that's been established by management and down to the records that you keep. That's where we talk about practices. So you go via policies, procedures are then created, and then you create checklists and guiding sheets so that the actions would match everything from policy. There must be traceability from policy down to actions done by everyone. Okay? Devote time to raise awareness. That's where you show importance. And typically what organizations do around all the topics where they have risks, when you do a risk assessment, you see, hey, we use emails. There's a tendency that people might click on links. People might set passwords that are not too strong. They might be social engineering. All those topics now would get put in awareness sessions so that when people join your firm, it doesn't matter if they're even security professionals, you want to give them some kind of awareness of your consideration of risks. And so there will be consistent view of security and risk in this business. Yeah. Yeah, so we have come to scope, and we had the question about scoping just today. So you see, scope is very, very important because it gives you the first view of how much work you would have to do in the ISMS. Okay, it will give you the first idea of how much work, how much effort, how much resources you need, and how complex the implementation will be. So you must decide on the scoping early. As a matter of fact, you can do a preliminary scope, and then when you get to the risk assessment step, you can now confirm and validate that scope. So you have to have an idea. And as you see, it says it should correlate with business requirements. Do we have a need from the law? Do we have a legal requirement to do ISMS? Then we know we already have an idea where to scope it. Do we have a contractual obligation? Are we trying to do business? Say you want to engage a cloud provider, or you are the cloud provider and somebody wants to engage with you, they might require you to be ISO certified. So scoping would then, of course, draw out from contractual obligations. So it can be from the law, it can be from contractual obligations, it can be from legal requirements and even regulation. That's why we refer to it as you should correlate it with business requirements. And then, of course, your organizational structure, whether you are split in so many places, an organization wants to do ISO and it's global. It has bases in the UK, in India, in Nigeria, in other parts of Africa, in the US, the scope, and they want to do it globally. That would point to what kind of scope they will draw out. Their technology use would also be another thing they will put in. Remember why I told you about putting ISO in IT or HR? Everything within that business area then becomes part of the scope. And that's why if you want to do it globally, it becomes really, really complex. That's how to do a scope. That's why we say it can either be small or large. It depends on where you would get the best benefit. That with the exercise we did where we talked about benefit, if it will benefit you to do it small, then of course do that, because there's the potential that you can extend your scope in subsequent years. So even if you start small, you can grow it to other areas. If you start with just one department, you can do it for the whole business the next year or incorporate more departments. So manufacturing can start, then you do sales the next year, then you do another function. So you can start small and then grow it subsequently. So this is the certification process for organizations now, not for people like you, individuals that want to get certified. This is for organizations. And like we said, you can split it into phases. If you do the PDCA, then you have 4 phases. You have the plan, the do, the check, and the act. Okay, so we show just about the this is where you have already contacted the certification body, not the project. This is when you want to get certified. So this is the certification process. You have implemented the ISMS. You do your internal audit and the management review in clause 9. So that is a check phase. Yes, so you have transited and moved things from project phase to operation. You should operate it for at least 3 months. The minimum is 3 months. So you would have gone through P and then the do phase. You must do the do phase at least 3 months before you come to conduct your internal audit. That's the check phase. Yeah, then you do your check phase and you do a management review. And it's at that point you can select a certification body. There's a criteria for selection of a certification body. You must look at your industry. You must look at the certification body's reputation. That means they don't give certificates on the fly, just anyhow. They are reputable. The cost also might come in. And then, of course, that they have competent auditors. So you select a certification body, and then they come and do a stage 1 audit. A stage 1 audit is sometimes called a documentation audit. So they're just looking at compliance to see the general operation of the ISMS without doing a detailed audit. The detailed audit is stage 2. At stage 1, they want to know whether they should even come and do stage 2. Are you ready? Do you have things done? Have you done your management review? Have you done internal audit? Have you done +4 to 10? They are just looking to see whether you have that already. They'll look to see whether you've produced an audit report, whether you've done management review meetings, whether you have competence and documentation in place. So just without looking into the documentation, just whether it exists. That is stage 1. In stage 2, they're looking within it to see that you comply with specific requirements, and that is a detailed audit. If you succeed in that, they will confirm your certification. That's the confirmation of registration. And then continual audits. They'll do scheduled audits every 12 months. And in the 3rd year, you do a recertification audit. Now, before all of this kicks in, you must apply to get certified. You say, hey, we've implemented ISMS, and then you apply to a certification body. You say, hey, can you please come and look at our processes, our operation of the ISMS? Yasin, you might want to express that question. Can we do an internal audit? Yes, you can outsource the audit. So you can say, hey, Smart Learning, can you come and do an internal audit for us? So you're outsourcing your internal audit function. It is not a third-party audit. It is outsourcing audit. So an external party can do your internal audit. Yes. It's like outsourcing anything, getting someone to do something for you. You can do the same with auditing. Okay. Yeah. As you can see, we cannot stress this enough. Failure to achieve senior management support is the #1 reason why ISO projects fail. I hope this gets into us because we've asked this question today. I've mentioned it like 3 times. So mark this as #4 and #5 times I'm saying this. Failure to achieve senior management support is the #1 reason why 27001 projects fail. You must get business and senior executive sign off first. Yes, the first thing is management buy-in. And we can do that by writing a business case. Yep. So if you've not done it before, you must learn how to do that as a project manager. Of course, if you're a qualified project professional, business cases are some of the things you learn to do. And if you are a professional security person without project management experience, but now given the responsibility of implementing ISO, then you can work with professional project managers to help with this. Okay, build a business case. There are templates out there, but of course, the content, you have to put in the content to tell a true story of the project you're trying to implement. Yep, so yes, the project doesn't start off without management sign off. Yeah. So the steps to certification is first of all application. You apply for it, you first of all get senior management, then of course with that business case, hopefully you get the budget. So the right document, the training and resources you need, possibly external assistance like we said if you've not done it before, and if you'll even engage consultants within it, and then of course those within the business that you would use. As you can see, it is typically the largest cost to use in-house labor because you'll be taking people off their normal duty. I've done a project once before where we had to work with internal people, and they absolutely gave us a dedicated building for us to work on the project. Yeah, so in-house labor is typically the largest cost. Okay, and you see, I said if you don't have project management experience, but you are, excuse me, a security professional, then of course you can engage with a project manager. But the business itself should try and engage with an experienced project manager to be supported by a security professional, or have a security professional that also knows project management. Okay, the business should also set deadlines and deliverables, like put everything out on a Gantt chart, so there's an outline of the project, and of course you have deadlines and deliverables and resources. And then of course figure out who should be a project sponsor. I'm glad 2 projects I did in 2017 and 18, the project sponsor in those was the CFO. And you can imagine the chief finance officer being a project sponsor and believing in a project is smooth sailing typically. Yeah. Now this steps to certification will show it to us in line, how you collect all the right information that you need, analyze them, know where everything is coming from, the input, everywhere it's going to. Essentially think chain of custody, so that no information is lost that is necessary, from cost, from people, from any essential thing. In fact, you keep it as a chain and no break. You know where every information is at any time, all the information and data that you would use, the resources, logistics, yeah, and all the tools that you need. As you see, the heading says zero implementation shortcuts. You are going to use deliberate steps. Remember, it's a systematic approach that will give you success and senior management commitments, right? So if it is not enough for you to fix something, but you have to prove it, because when the auditors come, they want to see what is the evidence that you've done stuff. Sometimes they might look at plans and be okay with that, but they would need to look back at your risk assessment. And remember, risk assessment is part of the whole implementation. So your deliberate steps in achieving implementation, they won't just come and say, and you will declare, hey, we have implemented it. They will look at proof of the things that you say you've done. So from policy to procedures to guidelines and the records of everything. If you say management is committed, how can you prove it to us? So they will ask you the question, but you must prove it to them as well. Yep. So choose a certification body. If it's possible, choose one in your country, but it's not that important. Price and cost is good. Remember, I told you reputation is significant. Yasin, I don't understand the question. What do I think about toolkits? There are toolkits out there, but toolkits don't implement stuff. They are just toolkits. You still need knowledge. The toolkits won't give you knowledge and competence. They are good only for documentation. The toolkits are only good for documentation. Right. So the certification audit now is a third-party audit. Before we engage with this audit, after selecting the audit certification body, we would have done our own internal audit. When the certification auditors come, the first thing they look at is the report of the internal auditors. So they do auditors reliability. You look at your internal auditors to see what they've checked, if there are any outstanding issues. And then they look at the main elements of the management system. They expect that the internal auditors do a deeper dive than they would, because they would look at the main elements and they would not be there as long as internal auditors would have been. Internal auditors are part of the business, so they should look deeper than external auditors. External auditors are just coming to look at the main elements and to stamp it. So they will rely on internal auditors. If you haven't done a good job with your internal audit, it could affect the external audit. So they'll look at all your documents and then they would devise a way to look at your processes that are described in the documentation. Yep. The surveillance visits, after the first audit you get certified, the surveillance visits are calendar audits. Every 12 months, they will come and look backwards to the intervening time. So if you get certified today, the 16th of April, the 15th of April next year or so, the closest working date, they will come to do an audit. And then between now and that time, how well have you performed? So within the 12 months, they will see what way you've operated the ISMS, whether you've been recording your incidents, whether you've been measuring them, whether you've been doing corrective and preventive actions, because everybody understands that failures will come. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. But how do you react to it? How do you respond to non-conformities is more important than whether or not it happens. Okay. Now, for individuals, who just look at the certification process for organizations. For individuals, you can do an ISO 27001 lead auditor course, if that's your track. So if you want to be an auditor to check what people have implemented, you can do the 27001 lead auditor course. And of course, this foundation we're doing leads up to the lead implementer course. So for those who would want to be implementing ISO, rather than checking what somebody else has implemented, they can do implementer course. Yep. There's also the internal auditor course, which is not for leaders, but for followers. And then, of course, this foundation course. So after management support is encased and expressed in policy for intentions and direction, you want to develop procedures. So there's a drawdown from policy to say, now middle management, it's your turn to do something. And so they would develop processes, they would establish procedures. So some of the baseline procedures include how well you control your document, because there's clause 7.5, documented information, which says you must go through the content of all your documents. The formats must be consistent, and you must devise and develop a document life cycle from creation to death. So who signs your document? How do you approve it? Version control and all that. That is the document control. They'll look at how well you control your documents, and you must create those procedures. You must have an internal audit procedure. There must be procedure for corrective actions and preventive actions. Those are the baseline procedures, and so you cannot go less than these ones, but you can have more. That's why it says to determine additional procedures. Some organizations just stick to this baseline, but that is wrong, because within the standard, it tells you how to figure out what other procedures must be created, and not just the ones listed. Okay. Documentation, there are specific mandatory documents within the standard where it says you shall keep documented information. Okay. Scope is a mandatory. Policy is mandatory. In fact, between clause 4 and 10, in every step, because clause 4 to 10 are mandatory clauses, you would find at least one mandatory document between clause 4 to 10. Competence, training and awareness, policy, like I said, scope, objectives, all these are mandatory documents. Annex A mandatory documents are required only if respective risk is present. So you select documents in Annex A after your risk assessment, but in clause 4 to 10, there are mandatory documents. So there are two things. Clause 7.5.1a talks about those mandatory documents required by the standard, and 7.5.1b says after your risk assessment, decide what documents you need. Sometimes you have confusion between policy and a procedure. Right, a policy is a high-level document. Sometimes SOPs, standard operating procedures, some organizations call them policies. And the reason why there's that confusion is policies have a hierarchy. There are general policies, high-level policies, and one like corporate policies. So you can have a corporate security policy, which would be hierarchy 1, level 1. Then you could have a general topic policy, yeah, which like an information security policy. So corporate policy could be enterprise risk. Then you have information security at level 2. And Level 3 policy would now be topic specific, like email policy, access control policy. Now that level 3 policy, some organizations call them procedures, some even call them standards. So it's just terminology and semantic. Okay, so whether you call them policy or procedure, the real high level policies are those ones where management express themselves. Okay. Yeah, so just like we said, you can have a policy of information, you can have policies. Now, clause 5.1 talks about policy, one policy, yeah? And then Annex 5.1.1 talks about a set of policies. 5.1 is the high level policy because it says top management shall establish policy. That's the high level one signed by management. Then Annex 5.1, that's the one those are the ones you create after risk assessment. When you now figure out that you have risks in certain areas, policy like as an example, if you do encryption, then you should have cryptography policy. If you do email, then you have electronic messaging policy and all like that. So there are two types of policies. You can have a high level policy from clause 5.2 and then Annex 5.1.1, a set of a number of documents. Okay, so you need one ISMS policy, and that's the main high level policy. It tells you what you want to achieve. Remember what we said about benefits of ISMS? That this policy should contain that, and it should be stated as objectives because that's the benefit you want to derive. So when you define what you intend to accomplish, those are your objectives and those are the benefits you think you'll derive. Okay, and this policy should be tailored to your particular organization because the requirement clearly states that it should contain issues, internal and external. Okay, it should identify a way of fulfilling your objectives, which can be called goals or aims. Within that policy, you must have a way of expressing your objectives. That is how you will be measured whether you have achieved your objectives. When the auditors come, they don't just look to see that you fulfill the requirements within the standard. They will also want to see that you have achieved the objective that you declared by yourself. So it should identify a way of fulfilling that. Okay, and those objectives are the benefits we all mentioned when we did this short quiz this afternoon. It should also show that management wants to, there should be an expression of continual improvement and the management supports that. Yeah, and there's continual improvement and that there's communication of the policy content and the importance of security throughout the business and to those interested parties that are relevant, not just any, but relevant interested parties. Yep. So the clause 9, the check part, monitoring and reviewing internally. To continually improve, it means you must know what is missing if things go missing, or that there are things that indicate that things are either going well or not going very well. Okay, and that's what we refer to monitoring and reviewing. And we must do this monitoring and reviewing in series. So every operator checks themselves in self-assessments, and they also pass it to their peers to check them. We must do self-assessment, peer reviews, due diligence of your suppliers and partners, internal audit so that there's a formal monitoring and review, and then external auditors will come. So that's the plan of clause 9 for monitoring and review, that you do series of checks. Okay. So this is the step-by-step guide. It gives you 11 steps. Some methodologies give you 12 steps, but this is showing you in 12. And of course, it's high level. Okay, you can open them up. What does it mean to identify the objectives? Those are the benefits. Why are we implementing it? How can we measure ourselves? That's the step 1. Step 2, get support. Step 3, define your scope, because now you know the benefits, you know your business requirements. Okay, some methodologies put step 3 as step 2. Once you define your scope, management now has an idea of the cost. But of course, some other methodologies put management support before scope. Then write your first policy, which should be a draft. When you do a risk assessment, then you can add topic-specific policies to your ISMS policies so that they are all speaking the same language. Okay, that's why in step 4 is first a draft ISMS policy. Step 6, you create a risk treatment plan to match up to the things you've assessed. In step 5, you can see that we set risk management or risk assessment apart from every other clause. It's that huge. Okay, so now you see step 7, you set up policies that should match up to policy. In step 4, it is clause 5.2. In step 7, it is annex 5.1.1, a number of policies to control the risks that you find. So the email policies, password policies, access control policy, and all that then come up based on the risk that you find. You would now, when talking about risk assessment methodology, risk assessment is how you identify your risk, how you calculate it, and how you prioritize it. So the methodology, either qualitatively or quantitatively, that allows you figure out what to do with your risk. Risk assessment is not risk treatment. So it's how you get an idea of your risk from identifying it to how high or low it is. That's risk assessment. Okay. Step 7, yes, comes from risk assessment Annex A. Yeah. So you have an idea of what clauses apply to you after your risk assessment. That's why step 7 comes after risk assessment. You cannot know your risk area unless you've done a risk assessment. Okay, how bad is the risk here? Oh, we do physical security. We are in this, so physical and environmental security applies to us because of our location. You will not be talking physical and environmental if you're a cloud-based business and you don't have a physical presence. Okay, so that's why step 7 comes after risk assessment, because then you know your risk areas. You will then allocate required resources to all the risks that you identify and create an action plan to match up to your risk treatment plan. So assigning responsible people for every risk line. You won't say, oh, the security manager is going to handle the risk. That's not what it is. If there are risks in the HR department, HR manager is responsible, but he can delegate it to somebody within that team. So every risk found must be allocated to somebody specific. Then monitor it by what we said about monitoring and reviewing. That includes an internal audit, which can be done by outsourcing it, or if you have an internal audit department, you can do it. Okay, and the internal audit then sends its report to management for review. The management review can be specific to information security, or it can just be the same board meetings they hold, but they have the ISMS as a topic on their agenda. Okay, so like we said, the first step is to identify your objectives. What is important to you? Prioritize your objectives, the things you want to achieve, and then of course the benefits you'll derive from implementing ISO. Okay, those are objectives, and there's templates that help you express those objectives in the way they should. Please, can we go back just one step? I just want to say one thing before we go. These objectives can be expressed using the SMART criteria. So they must be specific, they must be measurable, they must be achievable, they must be realistic, and then of course framed within a specific time. Okay, so they must pass that criteria. Yes, Dave, you can get the video. We'll tell you that again during the break. You can get the video, and we'll tell you how to get the video. Okay, so once you have stated your objectives, now those objectives must align to the business. You cannot frame your security objectives in such a way that it's not telling the story the business wants to hear. Remember, I gave you the illustration of a train going in a certain direction, and the ISMS, just a coach. The coach cannot be going east while the train is going north. So security and the ISMS must align with the business strategy, the direction the business wants to go. If they say, hey, we want to do business with North Korea, you can't come and say, no, we're security. You can't do that. You don't own the business. They decide. All they want you to do is, how can we do that securely? So you must align to their thought and their direction. And that is how you get their support. So the key thing for getting management support is aligning security or aligning risk management to the business strategy. Once you are thinking the same thing they are thinking and wanting to make them do it good, and if you do your business case, you show them you are going to save them money while they are being safe, while they're being secure, of course you'll be successful. So that is one way to get management support. Okay. Yep. So once we get management support and they also help us influence middle management and maybe even the whole business, we can now define the scope. Don't forget, I also told you that some methodology, because when you are an external consultant and you go and do for different businesses, they have different favors, different ways they like things to be done. So some like step 2 as step 3, and step 3 as step 2, and some just the way we present it. So how can you prove management support to auditors? Very good question. These people are making me sweat. Now, if you look in the standard, anywhere it says top management shall, means top management has responsibilities to perform. As an example, top management shall establish policy. How do we prove they have established a policy? The policy must be saying what they want. So it's an expression of their intention. They might not be the ones to write it, but they must be the ones that sign it. And if they sign it and the auditors come and they ask them questions about the policy, they must understand it. If they don't understand it, that means that's not their expression. That's not them saying those things. So the policy must capture their essence. And when auditors ask them, they must know it. And of course, if we see evidence, if I put on my audit hat now and I look at when somebody made a request for resources, we need firewall, and it takes 10 months to get it, that doesn't show management support. So management support you can, and then of course, management review meetings, they're supposed to attend review meetings and they go there and they sleep throughout. There's no input. I look at the minutes of the meeting, I don't see any input from them, or they don't even attend. Those are ways of getting management, figuring out whether they are committed, okay? So you go to all the places where it says top management shall and all those kind of things, okay? So the scope now, you will now figure out where you will derive benefit. Don't forget, we've already expressed the objective, customer satisfaction. Where would we implement this? Where customers will get a benefit. Where would we go to? All those places, all those benefits we listed, whichever one is aligned to business and we select it, it would help us determine scope. So as an example, I want to do, yes, auditors will ask top management, is a management system, top management are involved? The standard makes specific requirements on top management. So for the scope, one of the ways we can do scope, I can say, now there's a store in the UK called Tesco. What do Tesco do? They are a retail business, but they also do bureau de change. They do pharmacy. They do logistics. They do opticians. They have opticians. So you see, they have different parts. But if they are struggling against Sainsbury, another retail business, or Asda, and they say, you know what? Why don't we get ISO 27001? It will differentiate us. That is market differentiation. If we've been having breaches and people don't trust us, let's now get certified. That way, the customers will have more confidence that now we are more secure. People were saying Zoom is bad. If Zoom now gets certified, they are basically telling you, hey, we have improved our ISMS. So once you do that, you scope to where you will get a benefit. Tesco don't have to do their opticians. They don't have to do their bureau de change. They don't have to do all those places, because if they lose those functions, they are still known as Tesco. They are known for their retail side. So that's how you scope. Go to the places where you get more importance, where you get more value, where it possibly will bring you more business, where possibly you get more contracts, where possibly customers will get more confidence, because this is what you're known for. So you scope based on the importance you get. You can go to functions, you can go to the whole organization and scale it and scope it to where you get the benefits. As you can see, it can be business units, it can be the whole department, it can be the whole organization, it can even be with your subsidiaries and other interested parties, if you like. You can extend it beyond your walls. Okay. Then you draft your ISMS policy. If you haven't done policy drafting before, for those of you who become consultants, sometimes you do everything yourself from start to finish. But of course, if you work in a business, it's okay to assign someone the responsibility of creating policies and your documentation as well. You can have a document management system so that you don't do these things manually. Remember, I said for documentation, content is important. Content must be relevant to the topic and the title. The format must be consistent. All policies must be the same. All procedures the same. All checklists, forms, guidelines. It's good practice to make them consistent. So format must be the same. And then the life cycle procedure from creation till death. When you create a document, there must be a justification for it. The person who approves it must be uniform at the right level until the death of that document. Okay, so that's why you see an ISMS is the highest level document and the most important in an ISMS. Okay, yeah. Please, just one more thing. Let's go back one slide. The issue about management's expression of its intention and direction. You see, the last statement says the purpose of having an ISMS policy is for management to explain to employees and resources about what needs to be achieved and how it can be controlled. So it's an expression of their intention regarding security and the direction they want to go. Okay. Then you need to define a risk assessment methodology and a plan, a strategy for how you want to do it. So the first thing we're doing is planning the risk assessment methodology, selecting the right one, and then conducting it later on. Okay, prepare a list of assets. This is following an asset-based approach, looking at their vulnerability, what threats can harm them, what controls you already have if you do, what's the likelihood of the threat happening, and if it happened, what would be the impact. That is the methodology. That is the criteria within 27001. Okay, it says to do that, it is important to formulate a risk assessment methodology to follow in order to assess and resolve risks. So if you follow an asset-based approach, you look at the weakness of the asset or the openings that would allow a threat to happen. And if it did happen, what is the likelihood and the impact? One of the steps after identifying the asset is how valuable are they? So you can either do it qualitatively or do it quantitatively. You say this asset is this important to us. If we lose it, we'll lose this much money. So that is an asset-based approach. And this asset methodology, asset-based approach, this asset-based approach is very, very good, very, very detailed. It's approved by ISO 27001. The communication, I missed that question. Hopefully we'll take these questions when we finish. Yasin, I saw your question, but I didn't read it all. So Wale is storing all the questions. I'll answer them at the end. Aha, but I'll take this one by Zoe. I caught this one. The difference between an information security policy and an ISMS policy is a very, very good question. Please listen to it carefully. Sometimes your ISMS policy is your information security policy. That is where the scope of your ISMS covers your whole organization. In that way, your ISMS policy is your information security policy. But where you have only implemented ISMS to a specific area, then you have to have an ISMS in that area, an ISMS policy in that area. But of course, that doesn't mean you forget about security in other areas. You can have security, but to certify, you might only certify a small area. So you can have an information security policy for the whole business and then an ISMS policy for that area where you have an ISMS. In that way, it is different. But if your ISMS covers your whole business, that means your ISMS policy is your information security policy. Okay. So we've done the risk assessment. We now need to create a risk treatment plan because now we figured out the risk following an asset-based approach. The risk treatment plan follows the risk treatment options that is already established in information security. There are 4 options. we can accept the risk if it matches our risk profile. Just imagine you go to a restaurant and you say, hey, I want to eat so and so meal. The size of the meal is dependent on your appetite, how much you can consume. Okay, so in treating the risk, you say, can I accept the risk as it is? If it matches your risk profile and it doesn't matter to you, or the cost is quite high, you can live with the risk, you would accept it. Or you can say, hey, let's put controls in place, it's too much. We don't want to leave the risk as it is, it will harm the business. You can put controls in place so you can reduce or mitigate the risk. And at the same time, you can say, oh, this risk is there, but it's not likely to happen so soon. Let's not commit too much resources to it. It might happen only once in a year. So like insurance, let's share it, okay? Because sometimes you don't know when an accident can happen, but you want to have measures in place to protect you. So where likelihood is low, but impact can be high, you would outsource it. So that's sharing. And at the same time, the last option is avoiding it. It's too highly costly, or the impact is so high and the likelihood is so near, you can decide to avoid that activity or that thing that introduces the risks. So that's what goes into your risk treatment plan, having those 4 options: accepting, avoiding, transferring, or reducing the risks, all to your appetite level. As you can see, it says there in bold, this is a crucial step in the successful implementation of 27001. ISMS is all based on risk acceptance criteria. It is all contextual, based on risk, okay? Everything around ISMS and information security is all based on risk. Now, I'll explain risk transfer again. In fact, I'll explain all the 4 options of risk. You accept risk when it matches your expectation of your appetite. It is within what you can stomach, what you can live with. There's no need spending money to get a control because it won't harm you too much. Yeah, you can avoid risk where it is going to cost you too much. I hate the rain. It's going to rain at 12 o'clock. I'll avoid going out. I'll go at 1. By that time, the rain would have stopped. So when you stop an activity or don't do an activity because it's going to cost you too much, that is avoidance. Some years ago, Lloyd's, TSB, and Co-op wanted to merge. They did their due diligence, but the risk to both parties was overwhelming, and they decided to avoid that merger and acquisition. Okay, so that is the avoidance. Transferring is when you outsource to some other party or you take out insurance, because insurance is regarded as transferring risk, but not responsibility. So when you take out insurance or when you outsource, that is risk transfer, because you don't want to employ somebody to attend to something that's not likely to happen soon. So when likelihood is low and the impact is high, you want to outsource it. Only pay them when they attend to it. Don't pay them on a daily basis because likelihood is low, but the impact can be high. So you transfer the risk. Yeah, you do indemnity insurance and all those kind of things. When an accident happens, I will be covered, but I don't want to, commit too many resources to it. And then reducing is when you put a control. You buy a control, you implement a control, or you do something about it because you cannot live with it, but you have the resources and the budget to close it. Okay, crucial step. And then 7, you are now doing, because you've done your risk assessment, you will now develop and establish topic-specific policies. Okay, so if you have issues around email, you are creating email policy. If you do cryptography, then you do that. If you do physical security, then you are considering, oh, what are the policies we should create for physical security? If you do whatever risk that shows up, you would create adequate policies and procedures. So the policies sit at top in that area of the business, and then procedures follow immediately because that's the way it works in terms of hierarchy of documentation. Okay, then of course, allocate the required resources because now you've done the risk assessment, you've done the risk treatment plan. Those plans must be closed, and they need attention of particular people. So you allocate human and capital resources to those areas. Okay. And then, of course, they must have adequate competence. So you train them, especially if they don't have the wherewithal or the adequate competence to do those things. You want to close the gap. And this is another area where you will see whether management is committed. If there's a competence gap and you need to measure people up or employ people and they refuse to employ them, when you write a business case, they don't employ or they don't train people up. Because in some places you say, oh, we need one person. In some other areas of the controls, you say, oh, for this control area, we need two people. Because what if somebody is not available? So the way resources are allocated is another pointer on whether management is committed to the ISMS. Yeah, and then of course, carefully monitor the ISMS, and information security suggests this monitoring in layers. Okay, just like we implement controls in layers. So, and one control on top of another. Say, as an example, there's a building, and in that building, there's a laptop. In that laptop, there is a very important data. Now, the data is controlled by a password, possibly, maybe even a biometric. Maybe even the data itself is encrypted, possibly. So you see, there's one control with encryption, and then you have application control with password, and then you possibly have access control, and you have the identification and authentication, because you didn't allow just anybody into there. And then physical security, the first layer will be a door to the room, and then maybe a receptionist, maybe CCTV. That's how you implement controls. And in the same manner, when you're checking, you must check in layers as well. This is best practice in information security. Okay, so once you do that, one of the last layers before an external audit is an internal audit. So each step fits into the next. When you do a self-assessment, it fits to a peer review. What have you checked so far? And then a peer does it. And then you do an internal audit where it is a formal review. The internal auditors are independent of that area of check. So they themselves will now look at what has been checked so far or what has been done so far, and they will get direction on how much they should check. And once they do that, that is, they are ready for an external audit. They should be more thorough. As a matter of fact, if you do not do an internal audit, then you are almost bound to fail. Not almost, you are bound to fail. You will not get a certificate. It is that important. Yep. So the internal audit must feed to management review. Another area where management commitment is viewed or seen is whether they have looked at the things that have been found by the internal auditors and they have taken decisions. If non-conformities are found, resources not adequate, what have they done? Have they asked for plans to be written? Have they committed themselves, signed plans, and all those other kinds of things? So you see, top management must show commitment by getting, it says periodic management review. The suggestion and recommendation is that it is at least once a year, but can be more depending on the risk that is found out by the risk management step. Okay. Right. So the risk assessment.
Right.
Yes.
So I think we should take, say, 5 minutes break. We have a lot to cover, and my plan is we should finish tonight so that we can do the test and the assessment tomorrow.
Sure.
So can we take, because I mean, you've been speaking almost over 1 hour now, and I want you to rest your voice, where possible, take water, and then we'll come back. So I'm suggesting we'll come back at 8:40, take 8 minutes break, and we kick off again at 8:40.
No problem.
All right, so guys, just 8 minutes. If you want to walk around, do that. I mean, you've been sitting or standing for almost an hour now. It's healthy to just, move around a bit, so that you can allow blood to flow around your body. or take water where possible, and we would continue at exactly 8:40. We might go slightly over the the 9 o'clock, the time that was speculated. But again, I apologize in advance for that. Because I think we still have a lot to cover. But so far you would agree with me, this has been a great section. A lot of people have been asking questions, and I believe that everybody is learning something new from this section. So yeah, 8 minutes, and we're back 8:40. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Cool. So risk assessment, as you can see, is a systematic process for identifying risks or hazards, as we call them, analyzing them, and then evaluating them, okay, within the business. It's very important that we get the definition correct. So you identify the risk because you want to assess risk. You have to identify them first. You have to analyze it and then evaluate them so that you find a way to either remove them, reduce them, avoid them, or accept them. So when doing a risk assessment, clearly define the words of incident, hazard, risk, accident. Make sure everybody understands it, especially when you're doing enterprise risk, because enterprise risk will have different definitions when different departments are doing their risk assessment, and you have environmental risks as well. You want to be careful that all the terms and semantics are clearly out of the way. So an accident, as an example, is an error, is unplanned, okay, but it still results in a loss. A hazard is anything that has the potential to cause harm, but hasn't occurred yet. It is there, okay? That means it has potential, but it hasn't happened. Meanwhile, a risk is a combination of the likelihood and the impact or severity of an occurrence, okay? The likelihood of it happening and the combination of the impact of it based on an asset allowing a hazard, an accident, or any deliberate act to occur. So those are the definitions we need to get out of the way. Now, risk management is an overarching process. It involves managing, it involves treatment. If we go back and look at risk assessment, one slide, please. Risk assessment does not involve treating, okay? Risk assessment is identifying, analyzing, and evaluating before implementing controls. When we implement controls, that is managing risk. Risk assessment will just identify, analyze, and prioritize or evaluate. Okay. Risk management is now an overarching procedure. It's overall how to understand overall risk, where we want to manage it. Okay, we want to proactively manage it. We want to optimize the best out of it. So we can look at opportunities and we can look at the negative things. But whatever it is, we want what is best. We want to maximize opportunities. That is risk management. Okay, and there are several frameworks for risk management. But before we can manage risk, that includes things like treating risk, calculating residual risk, stakeholder engagement and communication, monitoring and reviewing. That is risk management. Before we can do that, the first step in managing risk is assessing the risk. So the summary of risk assessment is you would select a risk assessment methodology, you would conduct the risk assessment, do a risk treatment, create a risk assessment report, and then of course a statement of applicability comes out of everything, and finally a risk treatment plan. So that is the summary of the risk management. Okay, yeah, so this is how it looks when we're doing the risk assessment as part of the risk management process. you do the risk, you select a risk assessment methodology to satisfy the criteria we mentioned before, where it must be objective, it must allow you to identify, analyze, and evaluate your risk. Yes, select a methodology that suits the business, and then do the risk assessment implementation. Now, the key thing out of all the list of criteria for risk assessment methodology is that it is repeatable and it is reproducible. That means one person doing it a number of times will always get the same result with the same variables under the same condition. And then reproducibility is that if somebody else steps in to do it, but all the parameters are the same, the variables are the same, the conditions are the same, that person would also get the same result. One way to ensure that is to get a tool, a software to automate it so that it's always the same, or to have defined levels of low risk, medium risk, high risk, so that when you have described it and you have communicated it, everybody recognizes low risk the same. Everybody understands medium risk the same, low impact, high impact. And so they will always choose the same thing every time. Okay, the key thing is repeatability and reproducibility. Then you implement the risk assessment. Then you go on to treat the risk, provide a report for it, have it signed and approved, because that now forms your risk treatment. The risk report is a summary. The risk register is for the practitioner or the specialist doing the risk. The risk report is for management. Okay, the risk register can be deliberated with. If you have a risk committee or you have a steering committee, they can look at the risk register. But the risk report is what you send to the top management. They are not involved in the details of the risk assessment. They just see the final reports. Okay. Okay, so you need to define an overarching risk management approach. Okay, it has to be comprehensive. So first of all, you define it for the whole entire organization. It can be qualitative or quantitative, any methodology. Remember I said, whatever it is, it's for the organization to ensure it is repeatable and reproducibility and reproducible. That means it will always be consistent. The results will all be consistent. And if it's qualitative, then of course you define the scales, okay? And at this point, you're also defining your risk appetite, which is what we refer to as your acceptable levels of risk. What kind of risk can you consume? If it's quantitative, you can put a score. If it's in 3 digits, you can say 280 is our risk appetite, or any number that makes sense to the business. You set the appetite from the beginning so that when you do the calculation, you would know whether it is within your appetite or not. Yep, so the ways of managing risks that have been identified from the risk assessment step. So when you start from the risk identification and you analyze and you evaluate it, where you are now managing the risk or selecting your risk treatment options, you can either reduce the risk, that means you evaluate the current controls that are in place and maybe suggest new controls, but you must have looked at existing controls first before suggesting, because risk management encourages cost benefit risk management, or effective risk management as it's called. Don't throw away existing controls if they are effective. Management always are looking for cost savings. So to show your value, you must look at existing controls and whether to keep them. And if they are not effective, then you can suggest on a cost benefit basis new controls. You can also accept the risk if it's within your appetite and implementing controls will be too costly or too difficult to do. Then you can say, let's accept the risk is within our appetite, and anything outside of it to treat it will be too much. You can transfer the risk, like I said. As you can see, you can engage an outsourced facility or outsource it, or take an insurance. So you can pass the risk to an insurer by passing on the risk. That is risk transference, or simply stop the activity by avoiding the risk. Yep. So then the steps to do the risk assessment is to first of all identify your assets. So create an inventory, find all your assets and give them a scale. or a classification, an importance, a value. So from first identify them, give them a value, then identify the threats to them. This is one specific methodology. Some other methodologies will force you to first look at their vulnerabilities before you look at their threats. But some look at their threats and then their vulnerabilities, okay? And all the way down, assess the impact of the threats if they did happen, especially if there are no existing controls. Will those threats happen? What's the likelihood of them happening? And if they did occur, what would be the impact? Okay, so you assess the impact likelihood for each of that. This is the step, the asset-based approach. So go first from asset, then to threats, then to vulnerabilities, then to existing controls, and then impact if it happened, and what's the likelihood. Okay, that way you would have calculated the level of risk. Yep, so you can form a risk matrix. If this is looking at it from a qualitative perspective, you can see the risk, the heat map or the risk matrix. Okay, on one axis, the x-axis, we have the impact. On the y-axis, we have the likelihood, sometimes called the probability of it happening. And it increases from left to right, low, medium, and high, and from bottom to the top, low, medium, and high. A combination of low likelihood or low probability and low impact gives us low risk, okay? But high impact and high likelihood, of course, is critical risk. So you can have a definition of each field within this heat map. For an example, we can say, hey, for all those things critical to high, we would avoid. For all those things medium, we would accept. For all the, we would treat. For all those things low, we would accept it. Okay, so this is how you decide on risk options. The risks at the bottom left are low. The ones in the middle are medium or moderate. Then you have high importance, and then finally you have critical. And the ones that are critical are the ones you should pay attention to first. So the risk evaluation that we do, this is the analysis. The decisions we make out of that is the evaluation based on priority. So that's the risk assessment. So we now go to the risk assessment report. Yep, document everything regarding the risk, whether it is low. Now, let me ask this question. Let me throw this question to you. Why would we document everything, even the low level risk? Why do you think we should document everything? No, I want someone audit, okay? For audit reasons, you need a complete record, okay? It may change by time. Thank you, Yazin. That's the one. It can change. Remember, control improvement. Risk can change. What is secure today might not be secure tomorrow. Personally, I prefer things around risk, not because of auditing. We do it because we care about our business. If you do things just to tick the box, just to pass an audit, I don't like to do business with those kind of businesses. Okay? Do it for the sake of being serious, of being risk conscious, of being a proper business that considers risk, rather than doing it to pass an audit. Okay, so document everything regarding risk because it can change. You have to monitor and review. Remember, the risk management process encourages continuous monitoring and review from start to finish at every point in time. Okay, so deal with risks that you consider unacceptable. Apply controls to reduce it, transfer it, avoid it by not doing the activity, or accept it. Okay? Very good. So you deal with unacceptable risk. Now, controls are policies, procedures, guidelines, activities that we do, processes, technology, people, structure of the business that would help us in any of the options of either removing, managing, or controlling a threat. So anything that you can use to manage a threat or a set of threats is called a control. It differs from a countermeasure. A control is what you put before a threat occurs. A countermeasure is what you do after it has occurred. So Anthony Joshua and what's the guy's name now? Ruiz. Anthony Joshua will take a punch and then he will counter it. That is a countermeasure. You wait for a punch and then you counter it. But a control you put before anything happens. Okay, so you get a list of controls in 27,002, and you remember 27,002 is an exact expression of the annex in 27,001. The annex in 27,001 is actually what is 27,002 with a little bit more information on how to implement the controls. So it has control objectives and controls. Okay. When you describe controls, you always describe them by their objective and by their type. So physical control, preventive. The objective is to prevent, the type is physical, or technical, preventive, technical, detective. Okay? And all of those things go into your risk treatment plan. Yeah? They are now specific. Before now, you had them in your statement of applicability to say we have these risks, and so we'll select these controls from 27,002 or 27,001 annex. Now we're writing it out in full as controls, and so they go in our risk treatment plan. There are specific actions. They must have budgets. They must have people responsible for them. Yeah, they must have time frame, and they must have a way of checking their effectiveness. Okay. So the risk treatment plan would define all these things and must get management sign off because they're the ones who sign the checks. So they must put their stamp on it. Okay, they must sign it off by management, not just anybody, but by management. Okay, no, CIA phone has said whether it's not the 16 box. No, there's nobody ties to that, especially in an ISMS. It doesn't have to be a 16 box methodology. It can be any number. I've seen some businesses that use just a 4-box methodology from low, high, and others use a 9-1. So it doesn't matter. It is contextual. Don't forget that ISMS is contextual. It's what works for you and describes your risk. Okay, so it must not be a 16-box one. The SOA, or the statement of applicability, comes after your risk assessment. It contains the controls that would apply to you. So when you do a risk assessment, you will now go to the annex or go to 27,001 and say which of this list of controls, and there are 114 controls in the annex in 27,002 for you to select. When you now go there, you will say, we don't do, as an example, if you don't do remote working, you would not select that. You will say, we don't do remote working. This statement of applicability, you will select controls that apply to you and justify why you select them. And if you don't have those risks, you don't select the controls, you will say, we don't do this, either because the law tells us not to do it, or some other business requirement, or that we don't do that activity. So you will not select teleworking control, and it will not be in your, it will be in your SOA, but you'll say we don't do it, and this is the reason why. Every other thing you do must be justified. No, this is after. The SOA comes after your, the SOA is what you do with your, is how you want to treat your risk. So you extend your risk register. Now this is how it works in the field. Your risk assessment helps you create a risk register, right? The output of a risk assessment is a risk register. You can extend your risk register by adding columns on what you want to do for each risk you find. Your risk register can now become your risk treatment plan because you can extend it by adding columns with dates, with people responsible. Just extend it, okay? And then that becomes your risk treatment plan, okay? The SOA can also be extended in the same manner because people want to conserve resources, or you can make it a separate document, but the SOA comes before your risk treatment plan. Yeah, you list all the controls in the SOA, but then you say which one is related to you, which one applies to you. So your SOA is based on the results of your risk assessment from where you create your risk treatment plan. So you extend it. Okay, you can extend it, rather. You can extend it or you can separate it. We would have done our risk assessment and we say this is the way we want to treat it. And then the SOA is saying what controls apply to us. Okay, the SOA says what controls apply to us. We justify the selection of those controls, and we justify those controls that we say are not relevant to us. So each selection or deselection is justified. or we need to see all the list of 114 controls. But you don't have to even stick to those 114. You can add more controls as well. Okay, you can add from COVID if it applies to you. You can add PCI DSS controls, payment card industry, data security standards controls, if that applies to you. So 114 can just be your base, or the ISO 27001 Annex can be your base. As you see, your SOA is what tells them what applies to you. So the auditor picks up your SOA first of all, and because they now know what applies to you, they will not be auditing you for teleworking or remote working if it doesn't apply to you. It gives them an idea of your scope. So your SOA is a reflection of your scope in terms of risk and controls. Okay. This is a very good, this is a spreadsheet of it. As you can see, to have a look, you'll go through all the controls, all the 114 are listed. You will now go step by step, one by one. Now, how do we recognize controls? They are 3 digits. So the 5.1 is the objective. The 5.1.1, as an example, is the control. Okay, so you would state the first column after that is what is your current control. You would list it and where it can be seen, where it's stored. If it's a document, if it's a process, if it's a technology, you would state it there. If it's excluded, you would justify it. So the next column after that is justification. You could exclude it because of the if it goes against the law to have that control, or against your industry, you shouldn't have those kind of control, you will justify it. Or if you don't do that activity, and so it doesn't apply to you, you will justify that. But if it does apply to you, then LR is legal requirement. It's a legal requirement for you to have that control, or it is a contractual obligation to have it, or it is a business requirement or best practice. And then RRA is a result of risk assessment. So you will justify why anyone applies to you. And of course, it can be more than one reason. So you're justifying selection, you're also justifying exclusion. And then a remark on the status of implementation, whether it's open, whether it's partially implemented, or whether it is totally implemented. Because this, by doing all of this, it satisfies the exact requirement in the standard of what the SOA should look like in 6.1.3D of the standard. Okay, so that's what you do for all 114. You see it continues. You do that for cryptography, access control, physical and environmental. And you remember we say the 3-digit one. Yeah, the tab says clauses on the left. Yeah, the clauses from the annex, not from 4 to 10. The annex clauses, because the annex are controls. 4 to 10 are main clauses. The annex is control objectives and controls. Yep. Let's go ahead. Yeah, so let me explain the question about listing the left column as clauses. If you see a dot a number, a digit, that is a clause in the annex. So A.5 security policies is a clause in the annex. A.5.1 is a control objective. A.5.1.1 is a control. That's how it works in the annex. Okay, so the annex also contains clauses from 5 to 18. A letter A and a digit is a clause. If it takes 2 digits, it's a control objective. With 3 digits, A.5.1.1 or anything is a control. Good. Don't forget I said you must always describe controls by objective and by type. Okay. Information security. Information security is essentially risk management. So we are now piecing it apart. A threat is a potential malicious act or even accidental act from a threat source that can exploit the vulnerability of an asset by stealing, by corrupting, by making unavailable a part of a system, of an organization system, or everything. So that is a threat. An actor or an action that potentially can cause harm is a threat. A vulnerability, by proper definition, is a weakness that can be exploited by that threat actor or action. So an attack is a threat. An attacker is a threat, and they can exploit an open door, which is a vulnerability. The situation that allows the threat to happen is the threat. And it can be malicious, it can be unintentional, it can be natural, it can be human enforced, and of course, it can be internal and it can be external. Okay, so threats exploit vulnerabilities. If there is no password, a hacker can hack. Threat. If the door is open, a passerby, what do they call it? A trespasser can come in. So open door becomes a vulnerability. The passerby becomes the threat. Coming in is also a threat. Okay, so threats exploit that situation. Tailgating, because you are not alert. Yeah, you are not aware. So lack of awareness is the vulnerability. The tailgating is the threat. Okay, threats are things that can go wrong or that can attack and take advantage of the asset. The vulnerability is the attribute of the asset or on the asset that is exploited by the threat. Cool. So these threats, the reason why we do ISMS in contextual form is because threats can be different. Yeah, it has changed now, but there used to be places in London where if you had your wallet sticking out, you would be certain to lose it. Okay, so location matters, style matters, culture matters, industry matters, your context matters. Your context is a pointer to what kind of threats you're faced with. Financial industries in the UK are faced with specific kinds of threats, or financial institutions globally are faced with specific kinds of threats. Okay, so threats vary according to industry. And then a vulnerability can be exploited, and so we need controls. And that's why we talk about Annex A controls, a way of managing the risks. And controls are either policies. Remember, A.5.1.1 is actually policies. And in other areas of the annex as well, we see policies. So policies, procedures, guidelines, practices, our activities, our structures are also controls. And these controls can either be administrative, technical, managerial, or legal. So that is types of controls. But we also said controls must be classified by type and objective. So if they are deterrent controls, warnings, those will be objectives. If they are preventive, if they are detective, and then if they are corrective, that's how to classify controls. So you see, 6.1.3 says we must look at all the controls and create a statement of applicability. Cool. So Annex A has 114 controls. It supports 27,002, and that's why you see Annex A in 27,001 and 27,002. They contain the same thing, but where it lists it as A.5 in 27,001, indicating that it's an annex, in 27,002 it just calls it 5. So A.5.1.1 is 5.1.1.1 in 2. Okay, they both contain 14 clauses, 14 domains. They have 35 control objectives and 114 controls each, reflecting that they are the same. Okay. Now you see one more point. The controls must have defined and respective RACI. That's responsibility. So you must have people that are responsible for the controls, people that are accountable for them, people that are consulted, and people that are informed. So for every control, you must create a line of responsibility, somebody that would be reported to, somebody that will be the one doing the work, somebody that will be consulted because they are the expert, and then someone that is informed because they need to, it affects their area of the business. Yes, so the 14 domains are also clauses. They are called domains, they are called clauses. These are them. A.5 is one clause. It is also referred to as a domain. It is all these clauses, all these domains, or even sections are an expression of layered security, defense in depth. Okay, remember I gave you the example of data that we on the laptop that is encrypted, and we have application control, access control, a door, CCTV, a building, gate. Yeah, so implementing security in layers, that's what this annex attempts to make us do. So we will have policy, but policy is not effective by itself to stop a risk. So your organization of information security must come in. Human resources security, how you employ, how you monitor them while they are in your premises. When they leave, human resource security is another layer of security. How we manage our assets, controlling who has access to it, making sure there's an inventory. Now, a RASI with an S is supported. So it means for every, if you want to delegate authority for controls, or you don't want only one person acting on that control, then you would use a RASI with an RASCI than just an RACI. An RACI does not implement delegation of authority or segregation of duty. If you want segregation of duty, then you use a RASI with an S in between. Okay, so asset management, and then we implement access control. This is for every area of risk you want to implement security in layers in the enterprise. Okay, let's go on. So A9 is that. A10, now cryptography, encrypt. 11, physical security, another layer. Then operational security, because a lot of controls might be related to IT, like change management, capacity management, malware, backup, login, monitoring. So it might apply to you. You want to implement that layer of security as well. Then we have communication security for information that is traveling on network, how to ensure that interference is not affected, how the material will be protected, how the message contained within it is also protected. And then if we build systems, we'll go to system acquisition, or if we'll go to system development. But if we buy, then security is in system acquisition, and it can act as another layer. Yep. Yes, you list controls, even if it doesn't apply to you. It will all be in the SOA that I showed you just now. Then you will say we exclude it, or you will list it, but say we exclude it, and you justify why you're excluding it. Or you will list all 114, but say why you are excluding anyone you're excluding. 15, if you use suppliers, that control you would select, and then it will form another layer. So you see, it helps you look throughout the enterprise. Some organizations actually call this an enterprise methodology, and some even call it an architectural framework, and they would not be wrong. It all depends on how they apply it. Okay, 16 is incident management, because your controls potentially will fail. Controls also have vulnerabilities. They also have the potential of failing, of even being attacked. So you want to have incident management as another layer of control. Then business continuity, and of course, considerations for laws, regulations, and contractual obligations under compliance. This is where we say ISO 27001 can actually help you comply with other standards and other frameworks, because A18 requires you to identify all the laws that apply to you, all the regulations that apply to you, and make sure you comply to them. Okay? Somebody asked that for certification, do you need to know all? Now, I'm sure Wale has said it before, but people consider me to be a hard pusher when it comes to training. I would say yes. If you want to hear an easy answer, you need to ask somebody else. So you need to know everything. Okay? You don't need to know everything at a point in time, but that must be your target. And you would say, I need to know everything. Okay? You don't need to know it at a go, because knowledge is continuous. Just make that your target. Don't say, oh, I'm going to know a little. Just target knowing everything. And if you fall short, you would have gone very far. Okay? So you see the count of the controls: 2 in policy, 7 in organization of information security, and the count Just goes like that. In operational security, in physical security, we have 15. Access control, 14. Okay, let's go ahead. This is the summary, just showing us the count. 14 in operations, 7 in communications, 13 in system acquisition and development for the system lifecycle. Supplier has 5, information security incident management 7, business continuity 4, very small, and then compliance 8 controls in that clause or that section. So we'll take a bit of the controls to just have a look at them. We'll look at physical security, we'll look at operations, we'll look at incident management, and then business continuity. So let's look at physical and environmental. Yeah, we already have an idea what this is pointing to. We're looking to physically protect our environment, our equipment, our people as well, and also demarcating our environment to say this is where we have responsibility and control over. Okay, so how your cables are protected, how your buildings are designed and situated, how your fences, these are all pointers to physical and environmental security. Okay, whether you are on a hill, whether you are in a valley or on a slope, yeah, all these things fall into physical and environmental security domain or section or clause. Okay, it's the way of expressing. Sometimes they call them domains when they are expressing that they are layered security. They're talking about layered security, they talk about domains. But when they're talking about it from requirement perspective, they call them clauses. Okay, cool. So we want to protect from physical threats, unlawful access, trespassing. Even sometimes it might even be, we don't want people to see what we're doing inside. So we shield it, we put screens, sun screens, and things like that. Everything around physical access that is unauthorized, that could even be accidental, and that we want to protect, we would use physical security. Sometimes information security gets involved in the design of buildings, whether from the ground up or when you are redesigning that building. You want to know how to design the room, design the position of different areas of the building into trust zones. Yeah, so operations is next, and that's 12. So ISO 27001 requires businesses to enforce ways to ensure that their operations are the things you do every day, their operations are secure. Strategy is what you do in the long term, and operations are things you do every single day. So how do you cannot gain or achieve your strategy if your day-to-day activities are not secure. So how you protect your information assets, your documentation, how you do your backups, how your operators work, and end users, in fact, that you are doing everything securely. That is operations. And that's where security operating centers come into play. The more technical people come into play under operations, okay? Because these are day-to-day. As you can see, there's backup. There could be incident management. There could be forensics and all those other kinds of things. Yeah. Okay. Communications is next. Now, communications actually is, in the past, in the old version was called network security. So communications focus is on network security, how you segregate the network into trust zones with firewalling, with intrusion detection protection systems, with your data leakage prevention systems, everything around network. Yeah, not the host now. For the host, you have, we already talked about operational security. And then for the next layer, which is network, you want to have security there. Yeah, so it's layer by layer by layer, and this is the network security area. Yep, we want to also have some measure of attending to incidents or managing incidents by creating a procedure, of course, starting with a policy to know how you would identify incidents, how you classify them, okay? But first of all, you define what a security incident is. And by proper definition, it is anything that is suspected or that actually happens and affects the triad of security, which is confidentiality, integrity, or availability. So it is a breach of, or by disclosure, by alteration, or by denial of service that affects your assets, that is an incident. Of course, you can then define it in your organization, but make sure that definition you make is communicated throughout so that everybody recognizes an incident as you want it to be recognized. Okay, so you can create a procedure or a process to have incident notification. No, the next slide, that's fine. Okay, so you can have a procedure so that once you have defined what an incident is, there is a way of notification to the right team, to the right people. Okay, either physical notification or automatic notification by email, by text, by any method. Okay, by alarms or alerts as well. Okay, once you have that definition, figure out a way of notification to the right team who would classify it in order of priority or weight, and then defined action is taken, defined response. That middle ground is where you take defined action. Then the incident is terminated or closed, and then collate knowledge for lessons learned. This is the 5 phases, and there are several standards for incident management. ISO 27035 is an incident management standard. So that can help organizations with their incident management. If they require it, it's not compulsory to have that. Okay, so we've talked about the notification. Whoever detects it must have been trained to recognize that it's an incident and report it either to a level 1 set of specialists, and those ones will assess and decide whether to escalate it. But the first thing to do is to do that notification, especially if it's been properly defined. It's then classified in order of its weight and in order of the severity or impact it can have. Then an action is taken to resolve it, and once resolved, it is closed. So that's the incident termination. And finally, there must be lessons learned. When auditors come, they will look at what procedure you use for your incident management, because every aspect of 27001 will be audited for its completeness and for its effectiveness as well. Yep. So 27001 as an added layer of control, another domain is business continuity. So it touches on the need for business continuity to ensure that a business can continuously function or deliver service to its customers. Remember, we said on day 1 that ISO 27001 has customer focus. It's customer focus, so it looks at your interested parties. How can you continuously give them what they need, the service they need, and protect information that's important to them. Okay. Fantastic. So we give you online resources where we've created this note from. Okay. And then we will test you, and then Wale will take on the rest. So I'll leave my job for this is done. Thank you. We'll take questions, and Wale will let us know what to do next.
Wow, great session, Roy. Thank you so much. If we have to put monetary value on the time spent between you and I planning, and some of my colleagues planning this free section, putting the slides together, the communication to people via email, answering calls. I'm telling you, it would be too expensive. But I'm sure that everyone that has been part of this training, the participant, they would agree with me that this has been a great value. So I want to use this opportunity to thank you, Roy, to my colleague Tunde, that have been working, side by side to ensure that we make this happen and make all of our participants happy. I also want to say thank you to you, guys. I'm sure that you have enjoyed this section. You have learned a lot, and when I spoke, just a bit of background, how we came about this giving back to you. When I spoke to Roy about, let's just give something back, he agreed to the time, so I have to just go and work out the logistics. in terms of how this is going to happen. We spent, hours. Um, 2 days ago, I didn't sleep not until around 12, and I've been awake since 6. We had issues with our Zoom. Zoom had limited capability, and we wanted something much more bigger. Knocking the slide together to put it nice in this great, presentation that you see today. It has been a really hard work. Also thank you to my wife, that helped me out, sending emails to you guys, trying to personalize it, because we didn't just want it to be another random automated emails. We wanted, though it's free, but we just want it to be nice, to be great. We don't want anything wishy-washy. We want you to have that experience as though you were paying for it. But I'm glad that you enjoyed it. So this is what's going to happen next. The assessment, the test and the assessment is tomorrow. Like I said, it is not compulsory, but it is good. All right. So what I'm going to be doing tonight is I have most of your emails anyway. I've already created a folder on our cloud platform where the video from yesterday has already been uploaded. And I'm going to do the same tonight as well. For this one, it shouldn't take me a lot of time. I mean, I'm just going to upload it. Then I will take your emails and start to add it into the folder. So please, I would, if you're still awake tonight, check your email, because you will receive a notification from a Smart Learning Gmail account. And that notification, all you just need to do is just to click on the link, and it will take you to the back end where the folder is. The folder is titled, ISO 27001 training video. Just click on it, and you will see the video and be able to watch the video, because my assumption is we're 145 today. We had almost like 162 people. The assumption is if you're coming tomorrow to do the assessment, then you also want to listen to the video and do some prepping. Like I said, it's not anything difficult, okay? But it would just be nice, to test your knowledge, all right? So watch the video, enjoy it, then we're here tomorrow to do the assessment. What I also want to do tomorrow is to do a career path section for you guys. I'm conscious because I've spoken to a lot of people, and I personally am an advocate of having a career path, and I've been doing this in the last 4 years. Many times, you find people that they do a whole lot of short courses. Like, you've been here yesterday and you're here today. So you spent 2 hours yesterday, you spend over 2 hours today again. This is your time. This is going to almost like, 5 to 6 hours that you've spent, here. Then you have to make something out of this training. And I really want to help you tomorrow so that we can look at various career paths that are there and how you can make something of ISO 27001. So for some of you guys, you are aspiring to go into cybersecurity. The question you're asking is, oh, how does it apply? Some people are project managers. How does it apply? What are the jobs that are out there? Some people are business analysts. How does this apply? And that's exactly what the section is all about tomorrow. So we would spend 1 hour with the test and the assessment. Then we'll spend another hour, for the career section. All right. So with the test and the assessment we're going to share with you a link. All right. It's just a link that we've created. All you just need to do is just to click on the link, put your first name and your last name, and you could, do the test. The test is about 45 minutes. And once you click submit, it will come to us, and just leave the rest for us. We will do all the marking between myself and Roy, and then we will issue the certificate. But again, on the condition that you are taking the test. Then after that, then we'll do the career section and I'm sure that it's also going to be very informative. Roy is going to be here. It's going to be very interactive, because the career session, we will not record it, so it means that you can talk back to us. We can take feedback, you can ask questions, and we can almost like, reply you in real time. All right. So tomorrow's session is very, very important. For some people that have dropped out, maybe because of time, that them, ask them that, we're having the grand finale tomorrow, and, we'd like to have them back. What would also happen tomorrow is there's a whole lot of offer, for some of you that want to take this to the next level in the sense that, listen, this is this is a foundation training in the ISO 27001. Then you can imagine what the intermediate and the advanced level would look like, So Roy, myself and Roy, we're not taking a dime from this. This is all free with our own resource and talent. But if you want to take it to the next level, say, or you want to do the ISO exam, Roy has been generous with his time, and it's also going to be even much more generous, tomorrow, by giving you a package, that could, that if you're interested in, again, nothing fussy, we're not fussy about it. You could say, yeah, that is for me. I want to do, take it to the intermediate level, hence I will want to do the exam. And that's exactly what I'm also going to be sharing with you tomorrow. We also have all sort of cybersecurity related courses that we also offer as well, for, and cloud related courses, Azure's, AWS. So some of you that want to go into containerized solution like Kubernetes, we have all of that as well, under Smart Learning, and a lot of good package that you might also be interested in as well. Okay, a lot of courses around governance, risk, and compliance for people that are non-technical. If you want to go in the technical part, vulnerability management, penetration testing, we also have that covered as well. We'll put this all on table for you tomorrow again, and if you're interested, just let us know, and we will take it from there. All right, Roy, I cannot thank you enough. The delivery was just top notch. Even if you're paid for this, I don't know if you will even do anything better. But this is just great. This is just great. So thank you, and again, thank you for everyone that has worked in the background to make this possible. Guys, Smart Learning, Crypt TV is the place. You will be sharing more information with you tomorrow that would help you with your with this journey, with this your career path that you have chosen for yourself. So I would end the call now. I'm just going to quickly look, because there's been maybe most of the things just thank you. If there are any questions. So I'm conscious of time. So I don't want to take us. I'm really, really conscious of time. So I'll pause.